So, in my experience in the U.S. public school system, or at the very least in the public school system of the state of Virginia, there was a prioritization on a single aspect of history, at least of this continent, though arguably you can argue Europe as well, but we're not talking about Europe today. And that singular aspect was the stories of the white man, the colonizer, and the slave master. And from kindergarten to senior year, I could have told you 1,000 different names of white men, and occasionally a white woman while we're at it, but only a handful of names belonging to indigenous people, or to African Americans, or to Asian Americans, because that is what school prioritized. Except I'm a bit of a curious person now, and have come to the realization that I grew up going to one of the wealthiest school districts in the state, and if my schools had the means and resources and the money to at least get the information to teach about anyone else but didn't, what are they teaching in the rest of the state, and what are they teaching in the rest of the country? So, we're going to find out a thing. And that thing is who was on this land before the colonizers, before the English, before the white man showed up. Because school never taught me that. And I really don't like being told, I don't know, in the context of history. Because you might not know, but I want to. So, let's go find a little thing, okay? So, to put into context, or at least so you geographically kind of can guess what I'm talking about, if you've never been to the state of Virginia, we're talking about the state of Virginia, and let's do a bit of a visual aid to kind of just help figure out where things are in relation to one another. So we've got the blue area here, which is the coastal plain. If you like beaches, this is where Virginia Beach is, and if you're not a beaches person and you're like a historical colonial movie type thing, this is where Williamsburg is too, and a lot of that is done down there. This area floods like crazy all of the time. It's right off of the Chesapeake. Red, Blue Ridge Mountains, yes, out of spite, I painted it red. Purple is the Appalachians, or at least part of them, because they go up and down the entire coast of the East Coast. The yellow is the Mountain and Valley, and between the Mountain and Valley and the red Blue Ridge Mountains, that's where a lot of the wine production is for the state of Virginia. Green is flatland. It's what we call the Piedmont. It's the green, the red, yellow, and purple that all make up the interior of the state, which if textbooks do go into the divide of the coastal versus the interior natives, that's what it's referencing, are those divisions. Now here I did end up writing down some locations, known locations of where tribes were, at least at one point in Virginia. The first of these that I ended up writing down was the Powhatans. And if you've ever read a Virginia school textbook, it refers to pretty much all natives in the state of Virginia as Powhatans. This is blatantly wrong and dismissive of all of the vibrant different cultures of the various different tribes within the state, both past and present. That being said, with that little bit of where we are geographically out of the way, what is taught in schools about the native people? Now, given how much research I've been doing recently trying to figure out who the native people were before the colonizers showed up recently, it's kind of all blurred in my mind who was taught and who wasn't taught. So I took to Instagram. I was like, hey, so if you went to school in the Virginia public school system, who do you remember being taught? And I got a few answers out of that. And the main consensus were the Cherokee, the Sioux, the Iroquois, the Powhatans, and there's one more I cannot remember off the top of my head. Yeah, well, there was 6 in total. My brain is it's escaping me right now what these last 2 are, but they're on the screen. And so that was like the main consensus of who was being taught. Mind you, we're in the state of Virginia right now, and we have so many areas and places and geographical markers named after the native people that you'd think maybe there'd be more that's taught, but there wasn't. And when I went into further research as to find how these individuals are taught about, or these groups of individuals are taught about in the state of Virginia, it would make Wikipedia proud, because there's barely anything other than scratching the surface that is taught about these people in school. So that's fun. There are 11 states in the US that make it mandatory that Native history be taught. And out of curiosity right now, since the majority of them that I could find I could find 10 of them. I could not figure out which the 11th state was. They are Midwest and West Coast. Or like Northern Midwest. Like the Montana, Dakotas, that area. I don't know what exactly that counts as. I'm going to call that Midwest and probably be wrong. But that is the majority of the areas where Native history is required to be taught in school. But now that I think about it, out of curiosity, I kind of want to call the Virginia Department of Education. I'll be back. There's been a human presence in what is now considered the state of Virginia for thousands of years. However, the public school system seems to forget this, and when it comes to Native history taught in relation to the state of Virginia, pretty much nothing is brought up pre-1607. And if you're not from the US and you don't know why that date is specific, 1607 is when the Jamestown colony is founded by the English on the banks of the James River. On the little map, I put a little note to it. But anyway, so pre-1607, like, nothing is referenced. And when it comes to the natives taught in relation to any part of Virginia history, it is taught in relation to Jamestown. Why? I don't know. Wait, I can guess why, and we've already covered why I can guess why. So, anyway, the legend specifically that is constantly brought up with the natives and the state of Virginia is that of Pocahontas saving John Smith. Now, I can almost guarantee you that this did not happen. Specifically, because from what I have found, mind you, I will put all of my research things in the description. If in the future I find something to contradict this, that's also going to go in the description. But anyway, from what I have found, John Smith ended up writing 2 books on his experiences at Jamestown, the first of which was closer to him leaving the colony, and the second was much after that, and it's actually what details this story with Pocahontas. Now, Pocahontas is, first of all, her nickname. Her actual name is Matoaka is what I want to go with, because that's what it looks like, and that's what it sounds like in my head. Spelling is on the screen. And she was the daughter of Chief Powhatan, which is another generalized name. Chief Wahun Seneca. There's 4 different spellings, and I think 4 different pronunciations, again, on the screen. And he was like the leader of the Powhatan nation? Confederacy? Grouping? The tribes linked together under Chief Powhatan. I don't know what the exact term is off the top of my head. Again, on the screen. And so the story goes, in 1608, he, being John Smith, is being executed by the leaders of the Powhatan tribe. Chief Powhatan, from various different stories that I've heard over the years, has some relation to it. Either he's there, he's not there, he ordered it, he didn't. Again, this is a legend that I'm pretty sure is actually false. And they all ended the same. John Smith, is about to be clubbed, and Pocahontas throws herself over him to save his life. she would have been very young at this time, like maybe 11, 12, like that type. And, like, there's, just like to put into perspective her age, for this whole occurrence, it feels like this didn't actually happen. It feels too dramatic in a way. Like, yeah, I get that there's the possibility it could have theoretically happened, but if it had theoretically happened, why was it only brought up years and years later? So I highly doubt that this actually did happen, despite this story's place in American history. It is enshrined in one of the friezes of the Capitol Rotunda, giving it a place as like a founding thing of democracy. Yes, the idea that because in this legend Pocahontas saved John Smith, she's in, with how it's displayed in the Rotunda, she's having this role in saving future democracy. Or with her, the same image essentially being shown as a relief over one of the doors, again in the Capitol Rotunda. It's put in this very elevated part of American history, but why? It's almost completely factually inaccurate. It didn't happen. Not real. Mind you, there's no one around today to say yes, no, maybe it happened. But if it did, why would it have taken so long for that to be brought up? So that's like the only story that's ever constantly brought up in relationship to the story of the Powhatan people and to the early history of the state of Virginia. That's it. There's pretty much nothing else that's ever brought up. There's little bits about the people of the Powhatan tribe that was in relation to Jamestown, but really that's it. That's all that's really taught. Now, if you're someone else who is in the state of Virginia and you were taught something else about them, good for you. I'm not going to discourage anyone else saying like, oh, this is all that's ever taught. I'm just saying that from where my point of view is, that's all that's ever been taught about these individuals. And it's just kind of weird because of the position that that one story has in history and the fact that it's pretty much, it never happened. It's a weird thing. Okay? Just kind of a weird, I don't know how I feel about this. So, I've said that a lot. Anyway, in Virginia, given how long there's been a human presence in the modern borders of the state, there's some like 350 or so active archaeological sites at any one time, give or take. Could be more, could be less. I don't know the exact number, that's just the rough guesstimate number. But in Northern Virginia, there happens to be 7 sites that are actually open to the public, the majority of which, at the moment, I don't give a damn about because they're for the colonizers or the slave masters because they happen to be either late colonial period or from the Civil War. So honestly, I probably learned about them in school, so I don't really care about them at the moment. 2 of them, however, they do have some sort of a Native American presence that they are excavating with artifacts that have been found. One of those sites does also have the colonizers' presence, but whatever, I'll deal with that later on. But that is the one that I did end up going to. I took a friend of mine, and we went to Eleanor C. Lawrence Park here in Northern Virginia, and we intended to see the actual site where the excavations were going on. Now, beforehand, I had called the park itself with the hopes that they'd be like, hey, yeah, you can definitely see the site. It's open to the public. And the lady that I had talked to was a very nice individual. She's like, yeah, so we found artifacts here that were dating to be about 8,000 or so years old, kind of putting into perspective just like 1 year of, like one date, giving just a basic idea of how long people have been here. They've been here far longer than that, but for this site, they're here for about 8,000 years. And the pieces that we have found were related to the Dogue tribe. The spelling that she was giving was Dogue. But I did find later on that there is another spelling and another, I guess, maybe a pronunciation difference, Doeg, for the same tribe, and they were associated with the Algonquian nation. And yeah, what they had found in this park were things like arrowheads or shaped rocks that they're assuming could have been either clubs or axes. And given those three things, you might think, according to this lady, that these were a violent peoples. But from what they have found and the dating for when this all is going back to, they're assuming that these, at this point in time, were a non-warring people. They were very calm presence on the land. There was no, like, violence going. So these, despite things like arrowheads and clubs and axes sounding violent, they do have a rather mundane aspect to them, with them just being a presence in everyday life. So my friend and I get out there, and I'm kind of hoping that, mind you, this is like the next day after I've called to talk about these the site here in the park. And my friend and I get there, and the lady that's there was not the one that I talked to on the phone, and I think I was just bad at communicating things. But anyway, so despite the lady earlier saying that there was an active excavation going on, the one that we talked to in person was saying no, there isn't. But we didn't let that discourage us. We did still explore the site a bit, and you can really see what Virginia would have felt like at that point in history, because the trails in the park itself are so isolated from the road. You don't hear any traffic from cars. You don't hear any of the planes going overhead, despite us being in the pathway of airplanes at that moment. But it's still a very isolating area, so you can kind of get a feeling of what it possibly could have felt like back then, or like seen how the natives would have seen it at that point in history. Mind you, again, this is 8,000 years ago that we were talking about with the Doeg being there, but it's still an idea of what could have possibly been seen by these individuals.
Let's see who was here, though. Nope, don't want that. Bye. Okay. Yep, hello, Hawaii. Virginia, where are you? There you are. Oh, that's West Virginia. Ohio, that region. We don't want that state. Oh. Hello. The Manahawk were in Northern Virginia. Never heard that name before. Who are they? They need to find more on the native people that were here. There's too much of the colonizers.
We don't want the colonizers.